Welcome to Tales from the Old World, a Warhammer Fantasy podcast.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Tales from the Old World podcast, where we talk all things Warhammer Fantasy. But we're really concentrating recently on different races of how to play them and how to beat them, more importantly for most of us. And this week we're concentrating on Skaven. I'm going to be talking with my mate Ed Howden, who's a real good Skaven player. And we had a game recently and he was good enough to not do the typical Skaven tournament army. He actually had a good mix of all the units the Skaven could possibly have, because I haven't actually played them a lot, so I always played them at tournaments when they were quite rough army lists. So he showed me more of the units, and also we talked through what to expect, the randomness of Skaven in terms of kind of what they can do, so much damage, but they could also do so much damage on themselves. Which units tend to be good against different armies. We talk about their magic items and their magic, the swarms, the different monsters we got, the artillery. So if you're a Skaven army who needs a bit more advice, or if you're just coming up against the sneaky rat bastards and not actually doing quite well against them, then this is a real good listen. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about Skaven, but
the great under empire.
The brave, honourable race that escaped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should we just start with your background in the hobby? How long you've been playing? Why'd you get into it? Can you remember your first memories of getting into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been into the hobby for absolutely ages. Fire had been a fairly good thing. Electricity was all the rage at the time. And then all of a sudden, I discovered through my best mate, his older brother started collecting. And the first thing I ever saw was the Marauder Giant.
Yeah.
He done an awesome diorama with a Marauder Giant. And I just immediately was like, wow, what is this? And he had all the old boxes on his walls, all the paint set boxes and everything. And it like from that moment, I was just absolutely captivated. And obviously 10-year-old me doesn't really get it, but coincidentally that's around about the time when you got Space Crusade and Hero Quest. So a lot of it.
It was Hero Quest for me. That was definitely that's why I have a Fimir army. It's literally just because that was my favorite model in Hero Quest.
In the whole
that's
thing.
The only reason. Yeah, sorry.
It was great. So yeah, that's what kicked me off. So I got through that way. Played a lot of Warhammer. Well, I played at a lot of Warhammer because the rules were very different, quite complex back then. Played a few games, but it just developed over the years.
What edition was it when you?
I think we were on 4th edition at the time.
That's what I saw.
Maybe even 3rd. Yeah, so I remember it going into 5th edition. You had extra box sets with magical upgrades and cards, and
the battle. I still have the battle magic box. It's like I'm so gutted that I've only got I know a couple of guys who still play 4th and 5th. Just want to use that. I'm so gutted that I just can't use it for 6th or when it's so.
But and you had 2nd edition 40k that had the same stuff, and you had the actual cards to represent your spells that you had out that certainly didn't have the corners bent of all the really, really powerful spells, so you could randomly pick those from
Oh, it was, wasn't it? It was like pick a card, any card, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I got into that, but for me it was the models. The models pulled me in. The more I found out about the game, the more I got into it. But the background, the worlds, the settings, Warhammer just spoke to me. It was that whole. I was reading Lord of the Rings at 9.
Yeah.
And, this just fit in. And this whole fantasy world was just wonderful and never ending. And that for me led to.
It always felt a bit more naughty. Do you know, like when you were that 10 or 11 or something, it just felt, it's like Lord of the Rings, but it's
adult.
More violent,
this was more adult.
Darker.
Yeah.
It's clearly a lot of people have a go at Warhammer for being so grim dark. But
yeah,
do you ever notice this? I haven't really talked about this to anyone. It's only in the last few years I've started hearing this word grimdark in novels. But and I was always thinking, I'm sure in the 90s Warhammer was doing that. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying Warhammer started it, but And there's other novels, but there seems to be like a load of them now. There's like a grimdark
I think it's because
category, but Warhammer was that.
I think it's because it's, as with everything, your Games Workshop's kind of made it famous, so they've lent into the grim dark future. So everybody knows that tagline, and then when everyone starts painting in a grim dark painting style, and all of a sudden YouTubers are talking about that left, right, and center on their painting channels, and then that's it. That's the new catchword. That's the new buzzword. Like, I hate the term slap chop. It's a technique that's been around for ages, but it's now famous, and it'll be a thing.
So I know because you play a bunch of guys, so you're a pretty expert dwarf player, things like that, which we're definitely going to talk about before. But
I am the honey moth.
I wanted to talk
I will flit from one army to another.
So I wanted to talk about Skaven because I'm just fascinated. I'm fascinated by Skaven armies because I still have I'm sure I sent you a picture. I still have a kind of an unpainted Skaven army on one of my shelves, but it just seems a very. Do you know what I mean? I need a spare few months and a lot of brown
to get
paint
done.
To paint the bloody thing. So why did you think, first of all, why was Skaven? Did you think this is going to be one of your armies? And what would you say? What's the real like? So these are for me.
Back when I got into the hobby, I remember the Skaven releases coming up, and they would I'd kind of collected Empire and Dwarves before that. And then some Skaven models got released. So I remember the release of the special characters. You had Thanquol and Bone Ripper and Death Master Snikt. And Snikt especially was just such a beautiful model. I still prefer the old metal model compared to the newer ones where it's like cloaks. I have both.
But I love the metal old one. I love that one.
Gorgeous, yeah. And those sculpts still stand up now.
Definitely.
Absolutely. You could put those on a table and they do not look out of place.
It's the four lords that I'd still say stand up great. It's head.
You've got Death Master Snikt.
Head Taker looks great with his back, but with the skulls on his back rather than. I mean, it goes up like a fan, doesn't it? Rather than straight down like in later ones, which I preferred that because it's kind of like a banner.
Yes.
Lord Skrulk and Claw, I think really stand up great. It was such a good range that period that when it was coming out.
I mean, Ikit Claw is like I've got both editions of that model, and I still prefer the original 1990s version.
There's one where in his stand is kind of like leaning a bit, isn't it? It's kind of like sideways, so his banner comes to his side. But they're to me that's peak Games Workshop quality. Do you know what I mean? Well, a lot of people might absolutely. Because I'm a 6th player, obviously now, but it was still the nostalgia for me is 4th and 5th, just because that's what. And I would still, I love the metal, the weight. Do you know what I mean? That kind of it feels expensive, where the plastic ones just don't. You know what I mean? So that's why you kind of think, I might as well just 3D print it because at least if it breaks, I can just print another one. And not have to buy a box set just to get that bloody one thing again.
Definitely.
So what in particular was the Skaven and then apart was it just how they looked?
So the thing that really got me was the Doom Wheel. The Doom Wheel was so unlike everything you'd ever seen before, and the Screaming Bell. It really stood out compared to everything else that everybody had. And then obviously, you read the lore in the background. And they are just this. I mean, I know they've lent more into the comedy aspect of them over the years, but this weird and wonderful. They're like this weird secret chaos power, this secret 5th chaos power. But they're a massive lore unto themselves.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's okay to have the comedy because when they do something really dark, it kind of makes it creepier. Do you know if you just got chaos with evil? So when they do something. Because have you read Black Hearts by any chance? There's a novel called Black Hearts by Nathan Long.
I have.
So there's a section in, it's not really a spoiler, but there's a section in that which is kind of like the Skaven orbit. But then somebody goes into like their lair and sees what they're kind of doing to women and experimenting on them, on this woman. And this thing. And I remember reading it going, wow, that's dark. So they were trying to create a new breeder. So the comedy of like Thanquol and all that to that, I think that makes do you see what I mean? Rather just grimdark, and then you kind of when it comes to things like chaos, like just a chaos lord, doesn't have a lot of what's the word?
Levity about him.
Character to him. So I'm all right with the comedy. As long as you have the
They are,
light
to
with the
my
dark.
mind, yeah, to my mind, they're the Joker of the Warhammer world.
That's a really good
You
way of
can
looking
sit
at
there
it.
and go, "That's a bit crazy. That's a bit wacky," but then all of a sudden they do something. You like, well, that went dark quickly.
Yeah, that's what I think's great. That's what's good about their lore, I think, because Thankor's quite obviously if you read the Gotrek and Felix novels, and he's got his own, but Thankor's quite funny all the way through, isn't he? Because of how brilliant he seems,
Yes,
but he does some messed up stuff as well. So
he does do some messed up stuff. Yeah,
yeah, and that's the thing. If you're just evil, nobody takes you seriously. So as soon as you surprise people with, oh Jesus, I remember.
yeah.
And then if you look into that, you look into their lore, and you hear things about like, you're like, where are the females? And you hear what their life is just, and you're like, oh Christ, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just like not a nice place to live if you're a female, if you're a Skaven.
Yeah, Skaven Plight has at best 1 star on TripAdvisor.
Yeah, I'm not putting a deposit on a place there anyway.
Yeah,
but no, and it's one of Warhammer's. I don't know. They kind of steal from everything Games Workshop, don't they? In terms of lore, like obviously orcs and dwarves and elves is very Tolkien, but Skaven is a very Games Workshop. You think? I always think there may be beastmen, but people say I haven't read the. Oh, what's that friggin'? Is it the Wheel of Time? Apparently, the bad guys on them are very beastmanish, so that's kind of maybe where they got. Because I always thought Beastmen and Skaven are very kind of original.
I always thought Beastmen certainly are very much kind of, to my mind, very much kind of like your ancient British mythology and Greek mythology. Yeah, they're your satyrs and your fauns, but taken and twisted. So they're, that's kind of, if you look at it, it's very Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You look at the Witch's army; they've got the Minosaurs. Right. I think that's where that all came from. So,
okay.
But I think Skaven, to my mind, I mean, I've not ever read anything prior to Workshop where Ratmen has been a thing, but obviously, rats have always kind of terrified mankind. So
yeah. So, but that's it.
It makes sense.
It's an original type of race with exactly what we were just saying, with a good character in terms of their lore is kind of funny, but obviously, because they're quite cowardly. But then there's a bunch of them, and their leaders do really creepy things. And if you ever read any novels or any lore that includes a vermin lord, that's actually gets quite horror-ish.
Yes,
there's nothing funny about them, and you kind of
no.
But I think they're great. So for people who've never really either played Skaven or come up against them, what's like a standard? We'll go with a standard Skaven list. What units are you expecting to see?
So obviously, you really in 6th certainly. You're going to lean very heavily into clan rats because they're a mainstay unit. So the clan rats allow you to unlock lots of other things. Some units you can't take unless you have an equal number of clan rat units. And with the weapons teams,
how do you equal it? You mean, sorry.
So, for example, like with your so whatever army you're running, whether you're running one of the specialists or a mainstay army, you'll have a mainstay unit, and your mainstay unit will allow you to take other side units in equal numbers. So if you've got 1 clan rats, you can have 1 poison wing globadiers, for example.
Right.
And if you play a more specialist list, your mainstay units may change. So it could become night runners. It's usually one of the core units, and then they allow you to take other bits on top. So it's just to stop you filling your army with lots of filthy, dirty things. Not that there is anything not dirty about clan rat units, because they are point for point, I think, one of the best core choices out there. They are cheaper than most Empire troops. They have the same stat line as most Empire troops, bar the leadership. But with the access to your weapons team, so your rattling guns and your warp fire throwers, then that's when they pack a really nasty punch.
But with the leadership, you can get that up, can't you, by how many ranks you have?
You can, yeah. So the Skaven leadership rule, their kind of strength in numbers thing, is each unit has its basic leadership. So be it 5 for a clan rat or 3 for a clan rat, whatever it is off the top of my head, or your leader's basic leadership. But you then add +1 to your leadership for each rank bonus up to 3 you have from that unit. So if you've got a unit of 30 clan rats with 6 ranks at the back, until you lose over half your unit, you're guaranteed a +3 leadership bonus each round.
Oh,
so even your leadership 2 Skaven slaves on their own would be leadership 5 as standard.
So basically, you're saying Skaven clan rat units, if you have enough of them, could have a higher leadership than Empire units that don't have a character, because they would be 8 leadership. That's right.
Yeah, so you get your basic leadership, and then you add +3 to it. So they're although they are fairly low leadership as standard, like they're only ranking about 5. But once you start adding in that extra rank bonus, which is great, but then you also add that rank bonus to your general's leadership if he's within 12 inches. So if you've got +3 ranks, you've got a Grey Seer in your army. Well, Grey Seers are only leadership 7, which doesn't seem particularly amazing. But then once you start adding that +3 rank bonus, well, that's now leadership 10.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
When you've got a leadership 10 core, the thing that some people make the mistake of is it's the unit that's taking the leadership test. It's their rank bonus, not the rank bonus of any unit that the character is in.
Okay.
So if you're reduced to 1 or 2 ranks, it's leadership 7 from the general +1 or +2, not +3 if your general's got a massive unit of Skaven slaves.
Yeah, so not his unit, just him. I get it.
Yeah.
So do you, well, I mean, still getting into the list, but when do you choose a Grey Seer? Because when we had a game, which was fun, which was, but you had a Grey Seer and a Screaming Bell, which is, I think you said that's not something you would bring to like a tournament or something. It's more like a fun game that we were having. But when would you use a Grey Seer, and when would you use a Warlord?
I'm still ironing out I run a Grey Seer at a tournament, and he's either been pretty useful or almost useless. As with any,
that's what I love about Skaven, just the randomness. The randomness is fun.
As with any magic user as your main powerhouse hard hitter, genuinely relies on what spells you roll up and who you're playing against, as to whether you've got useful spells against the particular opponent or whether you've just rolled a bunch of dross.
Yeah.
They do absolutely nothing. So Skaven chieftains aren't actual. Skaven warlords and Skaven chieftains aren't too bad. They're like Empire heroes. They're nothing to think about. You wouldn't want to build an army around them, but they're not shabby either. With certain magic item builds, you can make them quite handy. So
they could take on an Empire hero and all that, but they come up against a vampire or chaos lord, they wouldn't be expected.
I mean, like with many things, if you come up against unless you are a vampire or a chaos lord and you come up against another vampire or a chaos lord, the chances of you going toe to toe with it are very small. But you pit him against an Empire general, you pit him against any goblin characters. I'd even put him in maybe not Black Orcs, but orc bosses. I'd put them up against. I've had them hold their own against dwarf lords.
Well, they've definitely got some magic items that you can give them, and that is going to.
They've got some really fun magic items,
especially for attack. We'll get into we will definitely get into that. Yeah. So what else are you going to see on your list? So you need to have a steady amount of clan rats.
So you'll get a decent amount of clan rats. You'll get the ubiquitous warp lightning cannon, because at 100 points, that's one of the best rare choices in the known game.
So what can go wrong with it? As we go through the Skaven units, let's mention
what can go right with it.
Each of these that you mentioned can do a hell of a lot of damage. So tell us the damage they can do, and then what can go wrong with them.
So with your clan rats, you've got obviously clan rats are standard troops, but you've got the specialist weapons. So you've got your warp fire throwers and your rattling guns. So your warp fire throwers are an amazingly strong template hit. So it fires out a flame weapon that just shoots in a straight line. Anything that takes wounds from this thing takes an immediate panic test. So even if you only kill one goblin off a rank, it's straight away. Straight away down.
Or if there's if you get like a general's, so you get the general's unit, he's got a big unit. You just kill one guy at the back.
You can panic them off the table.
If that guy rolls bad, they could be gone.
Yeah, the downside to that is obviously it can explode, and if it
I
malfunctions,
heard that's bad. I heard that's a
yeah,
downside.
it can explode. It can also set the guys on fire, and then they run around in a random direction. Then they blow up. And obviously, these things tend to be quite close to your own units, so the chance
Yeah.
that when something goes wrong, it goes wrong next to your side, not the enemy. It's quite harsh.
So what's the distance they've got to be away from your unit at all
So
times, or
they,
or
if
you
they're
just
within
keep them
3 inches,
close to not be shot? Is that what the trick is?
you keep them close but not be shot. So if they're within 3 inches of their parent unit, they can use their leadership and they count as a detachment, so they can't be picked out separately. They're like an independent character.
Okay.
So that's good. You've then got your rattling gun. So your rattling gun's brilliant. You basically roll a d6, and that's the number of shots that it inflicts on the enemy.
Yeah.
You can then roll another d6 and add that number, and you can keep going and going and going. Now the trick there is you keep going until you roll a double, and then depending on what double you've rolled depends on what's gone wrong. So
Okay.
double one or double two, it just doesn't fire that turn. No big loss. Normally that happens to me when I've done a stand and shoot reaction, so I'm going to die anyway.
Yeah.
Double five and double six, it explodes. So
Right.
if you roll that first dice and it's a six, you've really got to think about, and this is the main thing with Skaven, it's that whole greed versus reward thing. It's like, do I go for more? Or
Yeah.
every time I get greedy on a five or a six, I roll another five or a six, and boom, that's
Yeah.
the fun one are the double
Is that
threes and
when it
double fours.
explodes? Does that just kill them, or is
It
it a
just
little
kills them.
template?
Yeah, it's not like the warp, like it's not like the warp fire thrower where it has a small template on top of it. It pops itself. The risky one, the really risky one, is the double three or the double four, because it fires the number of shots, so either 6 or 8 shots, but you roll the artillery dice and it spins in a random direction, and that's the direction it fires in, and it hits whatever is in its path. So, as you can imagine,
brilliant.
invariably, when it does go wrong like that, it never points at the enemy when it goes wrong. It's always pointing at my unit or at the most vulnerable unit I've got.
Do you play it? Do you tend to always go for a second roll, or do you tend to play it safe and like, oh, I've got a 6, I should keep that, or do you get the greed and do you know what I mean?
I try to play with it unless it's an absolutely vital turn and I've just rolled a 6. And I'm like, I can't risk this thing exploding and not shooting. I need those 6 shots where I'll leave it. A lot of the time, the inner cheesemonger in me goes, have it, do it, roll it again, roll it again, roll it again. And 9 times out of 10, I pay the price for it.
Okay. All right. So we've also got the warp light cannons that you said.
So yeah, you've got your warp lightning cannons. You'll see those a lot because they're amazing. It's effectively a cannon that fires 8d6 inches in a straight line. It ignores all intervening terrain that isn't stone. So it shoots through woods. It can shoot through any building you've not declared as stone. It just draws a straight line through absolutely everything. You then roll the artillery dice. So it's anywhere between strength 2 to strength 10. And everything under that line takes that strength hit regardless.
Yeah.
So it's either a little bit pants or absolutely amazing.
Right.
And then any multi-wound creature underneath that line takes d6 wounds as well.
So that's rough. But again, the pros and the cons of the Skaven, because I've known that, because I've seen Skaven warp, like, because I've been in like events and like the cannon's pointing the wrong direction, and you're like, what's that?
Yeah.
What's going on there? So it's kind of, but the misfire can go badly, can't it?
Yeah, like with most war machines, it'll either explode and poof, that's it, it's gone.
Yeah.
You can get the middling results. Your 3 to 4 is you put a large blast template over the warp lightning cannon, and the warp lightning cannon and anything under that template takes a hit as well. So if you've packed your guys quite densely around it, you're in trouble.
How many rats does it need to fire?
It counts as a chariot, so it doesn't have a crew as such.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So until it's lost all of its wounds, until it's lost its 3 wounds, it keeps operating.
But you can, because I didn't know until we played that you were telling me that if I charge your lightning cannon, it just runs. There's no holding. There's just
its only charge reaction is to flee when it's charged. So if you see a warp lightning cannon and you've got skirmishers, just head them straight for it until you can draw a line of sight to charge it, because then it has to run away. And if it's set up on the back line, you can just run them straight out.
Yeah, that because you don't. Yeah, because they usually are, aren't they? They're usually right at the edge a lot of time.
Quite often, I mean, myself, I do it. I did it in our game, and it's worked for me, and it's also worked against me because they can see through all intervening terrain. You can deploy them in a wood, so the enemy can't see them, but they can see the enemy.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, you did. That's a good shout.
Downside to that is when you do get charged as you flee, you're now, because it moves like a chariot, it counts as a chariot. So it's now a chariot moving in a wood, so it takes D6 strength 6 hits as it moves. So it can be genius.
Greed against what's it again? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But the fun bit is when you roll when it misfires, one of the misfire results is it spins in a random direction and then immediately fires the maximum distance at strength 10.
I didn't know about the strength 10 bit. Oh,
yeah, it fires maximum distance, maximum strength. And that's one of those bits where you roll that artillery dice and close your eyes because you just pray it hasn't drawn a straight line down your own side through your own general.
Yeah. But you had 2 of those in our game. Is that usually what you do, or do you take? Are they a rare? They're a rare choice.
They're a rare choice, yeah. So I'll quite often pack 2. It depends what I'm playing, who I'm playing.
What are the other rare choices that would be instead? Is it plague sensor bearers? Is that no?
You've got plague sensor bearers, but that means you've got to have taken plague monks to have unlocked them because sensor bearers are only unlocked by plague monks. I don't particularly rate plague monks because I've never had them work for me.
But would you have plague monks just to do you rate sensor bearers?
I do love sensor bearers, and if there was a way I could take them without using points on plague monks, I would do, but I can't, so I don't.
So how do they work, sensor bearers, in terms of why are they so strong and why are they a rare choice?
They're incredibly tough. So they're toughness 4. They run around with the plague sensors, so they're effectively running around like they've got great weapons, but it's the poison cloud that they generate. So effectively, I believe it's been a long time since I played them, but I believe essentially everything in base-to-base contact with them takes a toughness test, and if it fails it just dies.
Okay.
They also have to do it, but they only fail theirs on a toughness on a roll of a 6 because they're used to fumes.
That makes sense.
So that
can do some serious damage.
Immense at dispensing. You get a unit of Chaos Knights or a unit of Empire Knights, especially like Empire and Bretonnian Knights, only being toughness 3. Just poof, they're just gone.
Do you get an armor save because of the poison?
No, because it's poison gas. So.
That's what it's about. Yeah. Oh, that could be rough. Elven Knights. You're getting dragon princes with that and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of your cavalry's not above toughness 4. So it's a 50-50 chance that you're just going to wipe out a heavily armored knight for something that's worth half its points.
So, but you would go, what would you choose? Say if you didn't need the plague bearers, would you still take another warp cannon, or would you just have a little skirmish?
If I could have them running around, if I could have them running around on their own, I'd have a unit of 10 of those running around the place.
Oh, that's good. So what else do you take as kind of like your special choices?
So special choices for me, I tend to lean towards gutter runners. So gutter runners are better weapon skill than your normal knight runners. They can have poisoned weapons, which is immense. They can have poisoned throwing stars, which is great because throwing weapons are massively underrated in Warhammer. They skirmish, they scout as standard. You can pay additional points to have them tunnel. So they act like they'll come up pretty much like a tomb scorpion will do.
So you put a little marker down, don't you, at the beginning?
Put a marker down, you roll your artillery dice and your scatter dice, and that's where they turn up from. Hopefully you don't roll a misfire, otherwise, same with dwarven tunnelers and the tomb king tunnelers. Yeah, they can collapse, they can die, they can appear somewhere completely different, or they don't die for purposes of the game, but they just don't ever turn up in the game because they get lost.
I can't remember. Was it a case of, wasn't it like round 2 they turn up on 5 up, round 3
So
they turn up on a 4 up. Is that how it works?
As with all your reserves, you roll a dice and it starts
Yeah.
off with a 4 up, 3 up, 2 up, and then they're there.
From turn 2, is that?
Yeah, from turn
Yeah,
2.
yeah, that's right.
So they're great for hunting war machines because, again, they can charge on the turn they turn up as well. And with a base move of 6 inches, that's a 12-inch charge, which is a huge threat range on something that can pop up in your opponent's deployment zone and have access to either the rear of many units. They're a threat to any form of light cavalry. They're a threat to war machines.
I was going to say war machines is the
any character that's stupid enough to be walking around on its own, unless it's Archeon or something similar.
Yeah. How many's in a unit usually do you have of them? Is it 6?
I like to field mine in 6s. I think 6 is a kind of nice sweet number. You've got a few extra attacks. You're looking at usually I take them to war machine hunt, so you're only ever facing normally 3 guys on the other side.
What did you do on ours? I can't remember because my Cult of Albion army had a couple of giants. I know you popped up near me giant.
So I popped up in the middle of a river.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of very wet rats.
We didn't do well off that. We didn't do well off that. My giant walked across that river and fell over, and you shot the shit out of him for about 2 turns as he was lying there. But that no more rivers in our next game.
No more rivers in the next game. But no, again, I mean, at toughness 5, you're not insurmountable. So I threw my unit of gutter runners against it, and I think I managed to roll like 4 poisoned attacks.
Yeah.
And almost wiped out a giant in a single round of combat.
Yeah, that's it. I never underestimate the power of. That's why some people aren't fans of like skinks for the livermen. Are you crazy? Just throw a million dice, you're going to get some 6s. And
skinks are amazing. Yeah. Anyone who underestimates skinks clearly is either not playing them properly, or just literally does not know the rules of poison.
Yeah. So there's also, I think, you're not a big fan of rat ogres, are you? I know we played them in your game because you were nice enough to have a really good variety, and you included a unit.
A good excuse to use things that I don't normally use.
That's what I'm saying. You don't usually. Why is that?
There are a lot of points. At 50 points a rat ogre or whatever it is. They are a lot of points. They have no defensive capability, so like a basic minotaur or anything. They're only toughness 4 with 3 wounds. So like ogres, they're not that hard to shoot down and kill.
Yeah.
And
have they got any Sorry. I was just going to say, do they have it? Just for anybody who doesn't know, do they have any different, apart from special rules on the unit they're in? Do they have any? What are their stats compared to normal ogres?
Yeah, they're. I'm just standing up to see if I can pull my Skaven book out as we talk, so I can stop talking randomness and actually
go from fact, just so you don't get a million comments after this.
Actually, I think you'll find. Yeah. So you look at rat ogres. I mean, their big advantage is their movement 6, so they are quick. They do run quick. They're only weapon skill 3, but they are strength 5. So it's the weapon skill 3 bit that gets me. Only hitting a lot of things on a 4+. So you tend to get 3, 4 on a front rank. Assuming they've all got there. So 9 attacks only hitting on a 4+. When you start playing out the average game, I've never really had them pay off for me. They're good at picking on.
I think that's the same for everybody, because all the Skaven armies I see at events, you don't see them a lot. I don't know if other people might disagree, but the ones I go to, it's always people will take just more rats. They'll just take more rats, more rats and more machines, please, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean the high strength is good. Don't get me wrong, the high strength is nice, but you've got to be able to hit to capitalize on it. If they were weapon skill 4, so I was more likely to hit, I'd take them every day of the week.
Oh, and the last one, so we'll just go back to, because you mentioned how you're not a fan of plague monks. Why is that?
Again, versus your standard clan rat, they're more points. They seem like a kind of attractive option when you're looking at them, because they do get the extra toughness, but they've got no armor. And again, you've got a very standard attacking profile.
Mm-hmm.
So, your Plague Monk, your Weapon Skill 3, Ballistic Skill Strength 3, their Toughness 4, they're Frenzied, which again is a double-edged sword. Yes, I've got the extra attacks, but you've got to watch out for frenzy baiting, and they can really interrupt your lines if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
And again, because your Weapon Skill 3, Strength 3, great if you're attacking Goblin units or Empire units or whatever, but a lot of the time they're just not causing the damage to justify the increased points cost of taking them over a clan rat for me.
So anything toughness 4, they're going to struggle against. Toughness 4, armored, they're going to struggle against, really.
Yeah, you're getting into a slug match, which yes, you're toughness 4, but you've got no armor to capitalize on that. So
okay, so
other people will probably disagree with me. I've seen them used, but every time I've played against them, they've never achieved anything of note.
Okay, so anything? There's also the Jezzails. Obviously, they're
You will normally see Jezzails in the army. Jezzails are absolutely brilliant. Huge threat range at 36 inches. They are strength 6 as standard and armor piercing. So any unit of heavy cavalry, if they can see a unit of Jezzails looking at them, is immediately bricking it. They only hit on a 4+.
How many did you get in a unit? I think you had 6 of them as well. Was it 5?
I pack 6. Yeah, I pack 6. They are 20 points a model, so they're quite pricey for a Skaven unit. But again, they're like
my brain just goes to my army. Sorry, which is just kind of 5 cavalry. I usually have most people have cavalry of 5. So if you've got 6 Jezzails shooting at them, you could wipe out that unit in one fell. Unless you got a hero in it. You could pretty much wipe out their unit in one shooting round, couldn't you?
You can cause a lot of damage. They're one of those units, like Max said in his thing when he's talking about Chaos Knights acting as a distraction unit as well. Even if they flee from a charge, they may have redirected something up there. The mere threat of Jezzails being placed on the bank can cause units of cavalry to be deployed away from them, going, I'm going to hide them from those. And then that lures you in the trap, because then you realise that they've just been funneled into an area where there's 2, maybe 3 rattling guns pointing in their direction the second they start coming close enough for a charge. That can cause a huge amount of damage in return. And then you realise that they were, and at 36 inches, then you find out they can shoot you anyway.
It's okay.
They're also lovely because they are, in inverted commas, reliable.
I was going to say, there's no. Is there any miscasts or anything like that with them, or what's?
So if you roll a 1 to hit, you then have to roll another dice, and on a roll of a 1, that's when effectively it's exploding. You hit yourself instead.
Okay, so if you roll 1 twice, is the only time anything's going to go wrong.
Yeah, you roll a 1 to hit. That means it's misfired effectively, and then you roll another dice, and on a roll of a 1, you've effectively popped your own Jezzail because it misfired at that point. That's the Skaven definition of reliable.
Because it's Skaven, something's going to go wrong. You can't just have. You can't just have some really good shooters.
Guys, if it only kills your guys once a week rather than once any other day, that's reliable in Skaven terms.
So, what is there any other units than typical though? I mean, we can move on to I suppose that's not really typical.
A lot of people, Skaven slaves are
that's right,
because
meat
they
shield.
are dirt cheap. Yeah, they're dirt cheap. Nobody cares if they die, which is great. They are a great way they're a great unit to leave out on the flank to protect a vulnerable flank or to bog down a unit. Again, if you can keep them within 12 inches of a general, they generate their leadership, so they can be incredibly brave. If you've got a leadership 10 unit of Skaven slaves, they're not going anywhere quickly. They tend to always be outnumbering, always have 3 ranks. You can buy them some command options. I don't really see the point. It's just not
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned.
Great way to hide characters.
One thing we haven't mentioned is it life is cheap? Is that the rule? Is that what it's called? The rule where you can actually aren't Skaven the only army?
Skaven are deliberately allowed to target units that are in combat with their own units.
Oh, yeah.
So again, some people play this one a little bit wrong. You don't shoot your own unit. So if you can't see the enemy unit, they're still not a viable target.
Right.
So you can't go, well, my unit is visible and it's in combat, therefore shots will go to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see the enemy, however, even if your guys are in there, you go, right, well, I'm going to shoot my own side then. And I'm going to shoot into that combat. And then effectively, you have a chance of hitting both your side and the enemy side.
Right, so pretty much you can only start shooting into their flank. You got to see their flank or something to shoot them.
You've got to be. They have to be visible to you to be able to be shot.
Okay.
I've
definitely seen that played wrong.
It was clarified in the FAQ that you can't deliberately target your own side. You still have to be shooting at the enemy. It's just that you could ignore the bit about you can't target the enemy when they're fighting your side.
Yeah, because I have definitely seen it where people were shooting as if that Safe as Skaven slaves were invisible, so they're just shooting over them. Which that does seem a bit.
Yeah.
So, but there is a risk. You can shoot your own guys as well, right? So, in terms of how does that work out in terms?
So what you do is, I've actually very recently read. I've been playing this wrong a little bit up till now.
Right. Okay.
Myself. So what happened? It was clarified in the 2004 annual. So what you do is you roll the dice on a 1, 2, or a 3. The shot is randomized. So 4, 5, and 6, you hit the intended unit. On a 1, 2, 3, you hit a randomized target. Now, the way you read it in the book, which is the way I played it until I read this thing, which is the randomization, it would then be 1, 2, 3, you hit your side, 4, 5, 6, you hit the enemy side. So effectively, you kind of had a 75% chance of hitting the enemy.
Yeah.
The clarifications I've recently read in the rules over there, and I will apologize publicly in a forum to say that I hadn't read this until recently. So
follow shoot people he's been shooting the shit out of for 10 years.
Yeah.
So
the way it actually is, the randomization is now literally 1, 2, 3, you hit your side, 4, 5, 6, you hit the enemy.
Okay, it does make sense the other way because you've been rolling that way previously. But the way that it's read, it makes it sound like 1, 2, 3 is a randomization, and 4, 5, 6 hits the enemy, and then you randomize your shots. So effectively, you've got a double chance to hit the enemy. But no, they did clarify that it was meant that 1s, 2s, and 3s hit your side, 4, 5, 6 hit them. Oh, okay, but that's
still a 50-50 chance of
and if it's a massive. And if it's a massive lump of Skaven slaves, it's kind of like, who cares if they die anyway? Because as long as they
you're unlikely to cause a panic test to your side, whereas you are quite likely to cause a panic test to the opposition.
And if Skaven slaves run, is that nobody else around? Nobody else panics because of that.
If they die, if they panic, no one cares about the Skaven slaves.
Poor old Skaven slaves.
Poor old Skaven slaves.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing about Skaven. You're like, oh, they're all comedy cheeky chappies, but they do have slaves, and they do treat them like shit. They do have slaves.
So they are horrific. Yeah, absolutely horrific. And then your other real kind of mainstay unit, in my opinion, is your rat swarms.
That I'm not going to say that won you the battle, which I guess because pretty much everything you did would you the battle against me. But you put rat swarms straight up the middle. My great sword, my Tatugan guards, great swords. They never got into the game, did they? I think they took 4 turns to wipe out that bloody swarm.
They are a tar pit unit. You just throw them at 5 wounds a base, 45 points a base. Their weapon skill 3, strength 2, toughness 2. So they can kick out some damage.
Yeah, they're not poisoned. They're not poisoned though, are they? They're not like jungle swarms.
You can make them poisoned.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's an extra 20 points base, which is
that's a lot. But
65 points is a lot for. Yeah, I'd rather just throw them at things because ultimately their job is literally just to get in the way.
They're a tar pit, and there's not. It's just just stop them moving forward.
Even a unit of chosen Chaos Knights or Minotaurs with loads of attacks or anything like that with a hero in it is going to take a good 2 to 3 turns to chew through that number of wounds.
So was it 15 on 3 bases? Is that right? Has it got 15 wounds? How many wounds are the rat swarm?
5 wounds per base. So I run between 4 to 5 bases, so that's anywhere between 20 to 25 wounds. You are effectively having to kill an entire unit.
How many did I have to get through? Did you have 5 in our game? I can't remember.
I took
Was it
4 in our game.
4?
Yeah,
But
I was kind. I only took 4.
Yeah, it was at least 3 turns. At least 3 turns to get, and you probably killed a few for your bad guys as well.
I took down a couple of your guys.
Yeah.
Then the thing that they did was they held you up to the point where I could cast plague onto your unit. I finally got off a good plague, which caused a load of damage, and then you broke and ran, and and that's exactly their job. If I stop a unit from moving around the table, and it means I don't have to worry about it for 2 to 3 turns, whilst the rest of my army deals with other things around it, all the better. Or I can maneuver into a better position.
My unit was the one on, because we basically had a battlefield which had a river going through the entire middle of it, didn't it? But it just had one bridge in the middle, and that was my unit on the bridge. So everything else had to cross the river. So giants were falling over, everybody else was slow and couldn't get everywhere. Well, so it affected the whole army. Just those big mountain of stupid
because
rats.
For some reason your giants decided not to walk towards what we said were the fording points, that they could just walk across, and decided to wade through the difficult terrain anyway.
Difficult. But you kind of touched on the magic there as well. Should we talk about the strengths of Skaven magic? And you kind of like
warp lightning. There we go. That's the strength of Skaven magic. Warp lightning. It is one of the best spells in the entire game.
Is that the 1d6 or the 2d6?
That's the one that you can choose to cast it at either 2 levels. So you cast it, it either does 1d6 strength 5 hits or 2d6 strength 5 hits.
That's right.
So whether you cast it at power level 6 or power level 9. Your Warlock Engineers get it as standard, so you are guaranteed to have it by taking the Warlock Engineer. And they are dirt cheap.
How many can you have? Is it 4 total? Say it's on a 2.
They're hero choices. So however many hero choices you've got, is you can take a Warlock Engineer. It's only the second spell on the Skaven list. So your standard spell that you can always have is Skitterleap, which is effectively a fly maneuver. You cast it on a single independent character, and then it moves 20 inches anywhere on the board you want it to go. Great for getting you out of trouble. If things have gone against you.
Is that, I can't remember, is that the caster moves 20, or you can pick another model and move it?
You can also pick a single independent character within, I think it's within like 12 inches of your caster, and then he can move it.
Okay, that's good. So you can either get somebody out of trouble, because I've seen somebody use Skitterleap to jump and then get to like the edge of, you got your army line, so they Skitterleap and then send another, and either... What's the one with the template? I don't think it's very strong, but just the fact that it's the big template that moves forward.
Vermintide.
So I see. So I think, was it Alex? I can't remember. It was somebody jumped into the side of my army and then just sent Vermintide down it in the big template circle,
or
just moving along.
Breath, which uses the flame template weapon. Your Gracie can get behind a unit, and it is a deceptively effective spell. But warp lightning is that's the one that everybody's scared of, because the fact that it's strength 5 hits makes it one of the more potent magic missiles in the game. The downside to it is when you roll for your number of shots, any roll of a 1 that you get causes a wound on the caster instead.
Because it's Skaven, of course.
Because it's Skaven, things will either go really, really well or horribly, horribly wrong. They are an ultimate risk versus reward.
It's a nice touch as well, and is it 13, which is
so
I was going to say irresponsible force, because I said this the other day and again.
It should be for Skaven, it's irresponsible.
It's irresponsible force.
So because 13 is the Skaven sacred number, they use they cause irresistible force or to cast or dispel only on a roll of a 13, which is a bit kind of harder to do. It's never 13 is never the average on any dice roll. You're invariably just one above or one below catching it on there. You'll see the double 6 and you get all happy, and then you remember that actually no, it's 13,
just pulls on your heartstrings just for a second. So have you got any other favourite spells out of the 6 that you think the ones to aim for?
Plague is always funny. You can get Plague off. So everything in the target unit takes a toughness test. which is always good for.
Oh, that's what made my unit run, wasn't it?
That's what. Yeah, so it's and a roll of a 6 is always a fail. No armor saves allowed, which is again is key.
Yeah.
Because units, that are highly armored but low toughness, really need to watch out for that one. And then you roll to see what happens. So on a 3 or a 4, the spell you get your spell off. That's it once and it dies. On a 5 or a 6, if you've got another enemy unit within 6 inches, the plague jumps to that unit. You then do it to them, and then you roll to see what it carries on. But on a 1 or a 2, your opponent can choose to move the plague spell onto one of your units.
Okay.
But that can sometimes help, because then you roll again and you can then jump it
back that's onto... a good point.
Death Frenzy is a great one. So you can cast it onto a unit once and it makes them frenzied, which can be incredibly helpful. You can then cast it onto the same unit again if they're frenzied already, and they go into a super frenzy, so they get 2 extra attacks. But then the downside is they then lose D3 models each turn, because the rats go into overdrive and burn themselves out as they're busy trying to stab the enemy to death and eat them.
But if you did that on, like, again, Skaven slaves or something like that, it's always handy to toughen them up a little bit when
that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Who cares? Or rat swarms. You cast it on the rat swarms. I take D3 wounds. Oh, what a shame. Never mind.
Is that only on the Skaven, or could you cast Frenzy on somebody else? So, like, can you cast Frenzy?
You can only target your own units. You can't make.
So it's not, because there's a few spells. There's a few spells that let you do that, isn't it? So I'm saying if you frenzied somebody into a load of rat swarms, that would be pretty sweet. But never mind. So how do warp tokens? Is that what they're called? Warpstone tokens?
Warpstone tokens. So every Skaven wizard gets a warpstone token per magic level. As standard, it comes in their normal equipment. You can then also buy additional ones from your magic items list if you want to spend points in that way. I don't see the point when they're free.
Yeah.
And it's effectively an extra power dice that you can throw into a spell.
Is it one-off disposable?
Yeah, it's one-off disposable. So it's it's a disposable, a consumable item, like a dispel scroll or something. Once it's gone, it's gone. But it's a great way. If you've ended up with only one spell, one power dice left, and you really, really want to get off a second warp lightning somewhere, or a third warp lightning, or if your Gracier really needs to cast that Skit Elite to get himself out of some immediate trouble, having caused some damage, then it's a great way of being able to jump out the tokens. Again, this is Skaven, so risk versus reward. You need to mark out that dice separately, because if it rolls a 1, it causes a wound on your side instead.
Of course it does. Skaven.
Yeah. I rarely actually end up using them, mainly because Skaven can pack an unholy amount of power dice into there. Especially when you're using engineers, because engineers are just disgusting. Because it's a level 1 wizard, so you generate dice turning up.
Yeah.
You then buy them the ridiculously cheap warp power accumulator, which generates a second dice. So they're generating like a level 2 wizard, but without the points cost of level 2 wizard.
Right. Yeah.
And then you buy them some more shenanigans, which means that they can the condenser, which then allows them to use 1 more power dice than they would normally be allowed to use. So they can 3 dice cast warp lightning. And then if you really want to, you can then throw in their warp token into that at all.
Yeah.
Man. They are disgusting.
I was going to get into the different clans and things like that, but I think we've only really got time for one more question. But I was just going to say, so should we just we'll kind of wrap it up on what are your don't leave house without magic items for the Skaven? So banners, items, just what are you like? I suppose in different armies are always different, but which one you always go with?
Storm Demon is the must take, the bound warp lightning.
Oh yeah.
That's an absolute must have. If you're going with a Gracier, do not leave home without the Eye of the Horned Rats to generate your extra dice. Warpstone Charm, which allows you to reroll a single D6 throughout the game. Pretty much a must have in any, that single reroll can be crucial to anything. I'm a huge fan of the Warpstone Amulet for a 4-up save. but you have to roll a dice at the end of the game, and if you roll a 1, your character dies and gives away all the victory points for it. So.
Because Skaven.
You've got loads of cool magic items that they seem to have a lot of anti-flying magic ability. I don't know why, but they've got loads of anti-flying magic stuff.
What is that?
And then
I'm trying to think who's their enemy. Is it elves? Do they hate? But they don't really come across that. It's mainly like dwarfs and obviously they fight. Obviously they fight elves, but
yeah, I mean they fight everyone, mainly other Skaven, primarily. But
well, I just did it for law.
Goblins.
Maybe just because you don't have any flying units, do they, Skaven? Are they? So maybe it's just,
so it's a good way to
because of that.
Down.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to go for the big boy things, you've got the famous Fellblade, the dagger that they use to stab in a gash with. You then become strength 10, and each unsaved wound become D6 wounds, which is really great.
Oh man, how many points is that? Is that
85 points? But then you've got to roll a dice at the end of each turn, and on a roll of 1 or 2, you suffer a wound because the Fellblade is so potent it starts killing you.
You're right.
You're right. I'm a massive fan of the cautious shield. So it's a shield, but if you lose one of your attacks, you can cause the enemy to lose one of their attacks. Or you can choose to give up all of your attacks, and your opponent loses 2 of their attacks. As you literally fight behind your shield and squeak in fear. Warpstone armor, which is a great suit of armor. For every hit the enemy gets on you, you do a strength 4 hit back on them, because literally they're rebounded by the force of the warpstone. Yeah, you've got an immense array of really interesting and unique magic items that you can create some quite nasty combinations with.
Oh yeah. So and I suppose last quote is just more, how many power dice do you think, if you're a Skaven, you kind of need to be at this number for the amount of power dice you're taking?
So
obviously it depends if you've got a grey spear at your lord, but just think, just to really get across, if you want to do well as a Skaven, or from another player, what to expect.
9 is what you're looking for. If you're if there's a grey spear in the army, expect to be facing 13 power dice.
Right.
Because you're looking at 2 Warlock engineer. So again, if you're kind of going tournament heavy, you're usually facing 3 Warlock engineers.
Yeah.
Your Grey Seer generates 4 on his own. Eye of the Horned Rats, on a 2 to a 6, it generates an extra power dice. On a roll of 1, you lose one of your power dice pool. And if there's a Screaming Bell in there, which is the most fun thing of all of them, that's generating an additional 2 anyway.
Yeah. Cool. So anyway, cheers, buddy. I really appreciate your time.
It's been fun.
Yeah, we'll definitely do another one for dwarfs as well, because dwarfs is you've been playing dwarfs even longer, haven't you? So
yeah, they were one of my first armies.
So we'll get into that in the next time you have some chance, mate. But otherwise, really appreciate your time, mate, and thanks very much for some good stuff there. Cheers.
It's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
Well, there you go. Hope you got some good advice through that. Cheers to Ed for his time. It was a good chat and a good laugh. And we're bound to talk to Ed again as well, because he's a real expert on other things too. So he's bound to be in for future armies. But otherwise, thanks for your time, guys, and I'll see you next time.